You are listening to the Enormocast.
Squama by Sportiva. A shoe for climbers who are not afraid to ascend. Climbing obsession.
Why are you so obsessed?
Squama. Squama vegan. Precision. Stability. Squama vegan. Skin-like.
Why are you so obsessed?
What would you do for the send?
What would you do for the send?
Squama by Sportiva. Squama.
What would you do for the send?
Elevate your sending with the Squama, and elevate your consciousness with the Squama vegan. All the sending without the animal-derived materials. Find the Squama at Sportiva.com or your favorite local shop. Squama.
What would you do for the send?
Before the dawn of history, on the primordial earth, many, many years before Canada even existed, there lived a tiny creature whose innovation changed the course of evolution. This extraordinary critter, in an attempt to outdo and outlive the prey and predators around it, decided one day to fly. Or glide, or maybe just jump really high. We don't actually know, but that's not the point. The point is that the little Archaeopteryx reached for the heavens and became a legend. What this little rebel could not have known is that its strange, brittle skeleton would be discovered hundreds of millions of years later and inspire the folks at Arc'teryx Equipment to help our own earthbound corporeal forms reach for the sky. Since 1989, coincidentally the year I started climbing, Arc'teryx has been innovating gear and apparel for climbers to perform when the weather becomes predatory, and also to help us look as spiffy as a lizard with feathers while we soar to our own great heights. And now, Arc'teryx has joined the Enormocast to continue the tradition of telling stories of the best and brightest in climbing, as well as the misfits, dirtbags, and fringe dwellers. So, dear listener, raise your glass to that brave little lizard bird thingy that dared to fly, maybe, and let's toast Arc'teryx for helping us achieve our own skyward dreams. Arc'teryx is now a proud sponsor of the Enormocast.
We gotta get
Listen, where you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
a
big
house. We
place
sold
that
it out.
side of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
20,000 seats?
We
really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed climbing with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style. Good weather, bad weather. Now or later, anytime for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by La Sportiva
Arc'teryx Equipment.
and with support from Maxim Ropes. Maxim has been keeping the Enormocast off the deck since 2012.
And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enorma at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Alex Honnold. It is December 16th, 9 a.m. here in Las Vegas, Nevada, and this is episode 300, an interview with climber, podcaster, dad, and all-around climbing badass, Chris Kalous. So a few little updates. Chris will be at the Winona Ice Fest from January 30th to February 1st. Nobody's ever heard of the Winona Ice Fest, but I would assume that it's very cold. He's also going to be at the Michigan Ice Fest from February 12th through 16th. God knows why he would do 2 Ice Fests back to back, but that is the kind of man that we are going to be interviewing today. Also, the hotline is open for the show formerly known as TAPS. I don't know what that is, but the number is 1-888-532-9822. I believe this is the first time I've ever read a 1-888 number aloud, and I feel like I'm doing something naughty. Or go to enormocast.com to find the number. So anybody wanting to call in for the TAPS show, if you've listened to 300 episodes of the Enormocast, you probably know what that is. The climbing report for my scene in Vegas right now is that I go to the Rainbow Wall and I board climb, and I'm having a great time doing both. So hopefully you are also having a great time with your climbing right now. And now on to the actual show. So we're interviewing Chris Kalous. He's the man. He's been climbing for 35 years. Put up first ascents all over the world, but I mean, who hasn't done that? Come on. Founded the Enormocast in 2011, founded the Run Out in 2018, because, you know, as anyone knows, one podcast just isn't enough. And I think he maybe was the first person to have me on a podcast back in 2013, before I'd ever done anything really. And so I still remember that. It was kind of a big deal for me at the time, so that's pretty exciting. I couldn't be more proud that I've now taken over his show. So with that, let's get into a conversation with the one and only Chris Kalous. You edit the Enormocast? I thought that was the whole point.
I know it doesn't sound like I do. And I'm recording video, but I haven't really used it yet. But the writing's on the wall, you know. You gotta
I know. So. Everybody does that now. It's so annoying because I sit in my closet in the dark and I'm just kind of like, man.
Yeah, I agree. But, you know, get with the times. Actually, we could talk about this later. There's been some existential crises over here at the Enormocast. So. Oh, yeah. That's cool. Anyhow, but that's neither here nor there. We can go ahead and start any way you'd like.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, so let's just dive right into it. We're interviewing Chris Kalous. Can you just start with the basics?
Yeah, I'm Chris Kalous. As many people listening to this know, I am usually the host of the Enormocast. I am 53 years old. I've been climbing for 34 years at this point. Pretty straight through, like no significant time off. Yeah, I got an 8-year-old kid. I live here in Carbondale, Colorado.
How do you start climbing?
I started climbing because I was into outdoor adventure in the Midwest.
Is there such a thing?
Yes, actually. I mean, you know, it's all a matter of perspective because I started backpacking in this little tiny park in Wisconsin called Kettle Moraine or State Park, and there's like a 26-mile hiking trail that winds its way through the fields and the farms and stuff, but a little strip of woods. And to me, as a suburban kid, and I mean, my family's outdoorsy. They're like, my parents are farm kids from Wisconsin, so they, you know, it's like hunting and fishing and those kind of things. But to me, like going to this little trail as a seventh grader and being left out there to hike with my friends seemed like the most incredible adventure of all time. You know, it honestly felt the same as like the first time I rock climbed. You know, that amount of like thrill to be.
And what was the first time you rock climbed? How do you go from hiking really far to climbing vertical walls?
Well, like so many people I've interviewed, I found an article in the magazine whose existence I thought maybe was apocryphal, but I've confirmed it, about John Backer. And I thought that was like obviously cooler than what I was doing, walking around in the woods. And so I made a plan that started in high school to go to college, specifically out west. You know, I went out west to go to college, but I had planned ahead of time to become a rock climber to the point of even like working out and lifting weights with the idea of being strong to become a rock climber. And so I ended up at Colorado State, and on the very first day I moved into the dorms, I went rock climbing at Horsetooth Reservoir. The RA on the floor, which was the outdoor adventure floor, showed up and said, "Hey, do you want to go rock climbing?" No, he said, "Do you want to go top roping up at Horsetooth?" And I was like, you know, this kid from Illinois, I'm like, I don't know what that is. And he was like, "It's rock climbing. Do you want to go rock climbing?" And I was like, "Yes, I do. I have been preparing for this for 2 years." So yeah, my first route was Cat's Eye, a little top rope up at up at Horsetooth and on borrowed shoes and borrowed harness. And I felt like I did pretty well. I wasn't like particularly scared or anything like you might be in your first go. And that was it. I was off and running. And I was on the outdoor adventure floor, which kids had signed up for because of their interest. And there was a few climbers there, like some people who had already climbed. A old mutual friend of ours, Jonathan Thiesinga, was on the floor as well. And he'd climbed a little bit.
He went to college the same as you? Same years? That's so fun.
Oh, yeah,
I didn't know you guys went to school together.
Yeah, we were freshmen on the dorm. And he had a little bit of knowledge, like that kind of enough rock climbing knowledge to get yourselves in trouble. And a few days later, he was teaching me how to rappel. And, then they were showing me how to put gear in the cracks in the walls of the building, had these little rock cracks in them because of the way it was built. And so they showed me cams, and I couldn't believe that those things worked. It's the first time you see a cam, you're like,
and so that would have been
ridiculous.
That was the early 90s, or that was like 1990 or something?
89. Yep.
Oh, wow.
89 into 90. That was my freshman year. Started the fall of 89. So I can pretty much count my start of my climbing like August 1989. So I can count back.
It's interesting. I think I started climbing in 95, maybe only a few years later, but for whatever reason, it really feels like we're totally different generations of climbing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like you're just so much more outdoor adventure, and I like grew up in a gym, and it just feels like a totally different time.
Yeah. I mean, you started in 95?
I think so. Yeah, I was 10. I was born in 85, and I think I started when I was.
Yeah. So you were on that first wave.
The first wave of gym.
Yeah, and kind of crashing around me as I started, but there was probably like some crummy little gym around, but there was, in the 1990, like in Colorado, they were still having fist fights over bolts and stuff. So sport climbing didn't exist. Like, I was right at the tail end of that, or the beginning of sport climbing. But when I started climbing, we make that joke, like there was no trad climbing because it was just called climbing.
Exactly. Yeah. What talk through your climbing progression, like in a nutshell. I mean, what were the things that you were most interested in, and how did you learn?
Well, the thing that and this is kind of pertinent because I just put out this interview with Jim Erickson, but there's days, hours, minutes after that first climbing experience, my friend gave me this book called Climb, which was the history of climbing in Colorado up to 1978. And that did two things for me. It's like amped me up. Like I was just like, who are these people? What is this thing? Like this is here. Like this is around me right now. Like I'm an hour from Eldo, and I'm an hour from Lumpy Ridge, and here's all these pictures. But it also like put us into this weird little time capsule because, as all these other people were like looking to sport climbing and the start of bouldering as like inspiration. I was
you were looking 1970s.
I was like basically 14 years in the past at that point. And so we revered like Core and Jim Erickson, and I wanted to know what aid climbing was right off the bat, stuff like that. And so that kind of inspired us, but also I had a van. I had a Dodge van, which is funny because that vehicle really like fits into my early climbing in a way that's kind of ironic now because we have van life. But it was just this empty cargo van that I'd put like some shelves and some carpet in, and like literally the back seats were bean bags. So it's like super safe, but I was the only guy. Like a lot of kids had come from Denver or whatever, like Jonathan didn't have a car, so I had this van, and I became the mode for everybody to pile in and go to Eldo or go to Lumpy Ridge or go to the South Platte or go to the Garden of the Gods, like just getting to these places literally that were, we'd open the book and we'd be like, that looks cool. The book being Climb, So that was adventure climbing, multi-pitch climbing was like, just seemed obvious. That's what you wanted to do. Like whatever we were doing at Horsetooth was like pure practice, like for going and doing bigger routes. Bigger routes was what you were supposed to go do, not fart around on like single pitch climbing if you had a choice. So.
And what were some of the first big challenges that you undertook? Like what was your first, like, this is a route that means a lot to me and I'm going to like go for it?
I remember some on Lumpy, I remember doing Osiris, which is this like 5 or 6 pitch 5.7. that when I started guiding up there, because that's another thing we probably should mention is, we would call it the OA, or the Osiris Adventure, because if you took clients on it, even though it was 5'7", it would just absolutely destroy them. Like if you were feeling kind of cranky about your clients, like you'd go do the OA, is what we called it.
Why is it like wide or really physical?
Yeah,
or
there's just chimneys and fins and like classic like groove cracks where you have to like to get any sort of purchase, you have to put like your whole arm inside. And I don't know. It's real. It's like
that's the opposite of good guiding. When you intentionally go up to destroy your client, that's like the ultimate sandbag.
Well, you could read your client, especially some men, that they were up there to be tested, so they kind of like needed. That was like, we were like their doms a little bit, it was like a dom sub kind of relationship. So, but yeah, so I remember that like early on. I got some pictures from it. Even a lot of adventures at Lumpy Ridge actually was real. Eldo was like even kind of, we would go, but it was very intimidating in a way that, those slabs up there at Lumpy Ridge, I don't know if you've ever climbed there, but super slabby, like groove crack climbing. And then a big one was Hallett, the Northcutt Carter, which was a 50 classic 5'7".
Is that the one that fell down?
Yes, it fell down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sad.
Yeah. And I was guiding when it happened. It was interesting. But
wait, really?
Not when it actually, I wasn't up there, but I'm pretty sure, actually, I'm sure that we were the first party to walk up there
after it fell off.
It happened. Yeah.
Did you know that it had fallen off?
No.
Like we walked up there. And you were like, holy shit, where'd the route go? Yeah.
And it was like, as we got closer, we started in the dark. This is not my ascent. My ascent was, years earlier, but we got there in the dark. And as it's getting light, so in other words, we couldn't see it.
Yeah,
like from the parking lot, even though you could see it from town. When people finally realized. But I was like going up the snow, like the hard snow that was still left, and like there's all this pebbles at first, and just like pebbly gravel, that was I was looking at like in my headlamp, and then it started to get lighter and lighter, and I got over there, and I was just like, I think it's gone, like, and I saw these boulders and strewn all over the place, and I kind of like ventured up a little ways with my rope on to see, like, because I couldn't even tell where I was at that point. Mm-hmm. Like it had changed so much, and then we realized what had happened, and we did something else. But
you did a bunch of bouldering first ascents instead. You're like God gave us a gift. Look at all these big rocks.
No, it was just like sharp jaws, But totally. But anyway, back to my thing. That climb for me when I went and did it. As a younger climber was like kind of a big deal. It rained on us, and like we just kept going, and like I think of it now, and I'm like, I would 100% have bailed now. Like I would have bailed, but at that point, like my concept of who I admired, these older climbers, like guys like Leighton Core, who had this like never give up attitude, like it didn't even occur to us to like stop climbing up into the rain, because we had, I had studied all the guys. I'd already read about Herman Boole and all these people, and like I'm like, well, fuck, we just keep going. Like this is what you do, and it's, hopefully we don't get struck by lightning. And so, it's just interesting how like I'm a much better climber, but I would not have climbed that in those conditions. Now I would have left, but also I kind of didn't really know how to bail, so.
Totally. That feels like a typical beginner story in a way, when it's like, I will succeed at all costs. And then later you're like, wait, I'll just come back tomorrow when the weather's good. You're like, who cares? It's like way less of a big deal.
You have no perspective,
Yeah, totally.
I don't know. It's like Cordes' disaster style. Kelly has go until you can't go back down, and then you have to summit,
What at what point did you start branching out of Colorado? Like when did you go to the Valley for the first time? When did you go to, bigger mountains around the world?
Actually, gosh, one thing I did is I studied abroad while I was still in college. I went to New Zealand for a semester, which turned into about 9 months. Cool. What happened is that my friends, all these guys I'd started climbing with, and we were like getting pretty good after a couple years of all these, endless manic, weird adventures that, could end badly, could end good. I mean, but we managed to all stay alive and keep our limbs and stuff. And all my buddies said they were, we're gonna take a semester off and we're gonna go to the Valley. We're gonna go to Yosemite, and back. I mean, look, I'm going to do a lot of back then, but back then it was like hard to find all this information. Like we knew about Yosemite, we knew about the climbing there, but it was just this like shining goal somewhere out in the distance that you go to. And so they were ready to go. And I hit my dad up, who was paying for college, and he did this clever thing where he's like, oh yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. That sounds like, oh yeah, take a semester off. And right, totally. And then he's like, and then just while you're doing that though, you should probably figure out a way to pay for college when you get back. Because I'm not going to pay for it anymore, So he basically was like, yeah, you could go do that, but I don't want you to, so I'm going to tighten the purse strings. So then I was like, okay, well, all my buddies are going to be gone. What should I do? And I found a way to go to college in New Zealand as a semester abroad, so I could continue to get credits for my semester. Because the other thing was my dad had a 4-year cutoff. So he's like, yeah, if you don't graduate in 4 years, have a good time finishing college on your own. So I had, I'm not stupid. I'm like, got to get this done, So I was able to go have this adventure there. And actually I was into mountaineering there. I climbed Mount Cook and a bunch of other big snowy peaks and ice climbed a bunch there and rock climbed. So that was my first international kind of thing. And then another one was right after I graduated, I started guiding in Estes Park. Back when like you didn't actually need to know too much about guiding to get a job guiding.
The blind leading the blind.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, that's kind of bonkers. But I went to Australia that following winter after guiding for a summer. And that was like my first, just go somewhere for months on end on like whatever, $10 a day kind of climbing trip. And that fully changed everything. Like that was the hook for international traveling anyway and going big places. But I still hadn't been to Yosemite by then. I think I went in the mid-90s, quite a long time after I graduated. So, but yeah, that was the other thing was the desert. We started going to the desert, and I got really hooked on climbing in the Fisher Towers. And I know it's weird.
Says no one.
Well, okay, look, I'm like this disciple of core at this point, right?
I know you really chose the wrong role models. This goes to show the power of bad influences.
I mean, some of that is true, but man, it brought me to these again, like ignoring a little bit of the trends that were happening. I think was probably actually really cool in the long run. Like I didn't just drop hard into sport climbing the way everybody was in the mid-90s in Colorado.
You never had Lycra?
No, we missed that.
You're too busy with a construction hammer and Carhartts going and like nailing your way up some mud tower?
We actually had a lot of wool, wearing wool like sweaters, like all those pictures of the dudes in the Alps. They always have these big wool sweaters on,
like knickers and stuff.
And knickers. I literally had some knickers.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Oh wow!
They called them capris later on, right? So they got cool again.
Man, you're like, well, since I'm swimming through the mud anyway, I may as well have my clam diggers on just in case I find something up here.
Yeah, but the cool thing is on this one trip that my buddy was with me, and all of a sudden, like, his girlfriend showed up in the desert, and he suddenly like had no more motivation to go climb in the Fisher Towers. Like,
what a surprise!
I know. And so I like got kind of pissed and grabbed all the gear and went and soloed one of the towers there. And that was actually, I didn't know anything about soloing. I did some version of like clove hitches, and I just kind of made it up as I was going along. I made a couple mistakes, obviously none fatal, but that was actually really a big move for me because I soloed a bunch of those towers, including doing like a couple A5 second ascents of these old Jim Baer routes.
Bad times.
Yeah, and so by the time I got to the valley, actually, I was really good at that stuff. And I remember sitting around the fire. Rob Slater was out there, if you know that name, and he was on this mission to do all the towers. There's like, there was like 20 some like summits considered there, and
in the Fishers.
And in the fish, like all the little dinky ones.
Yeah, weird.
There's all these.
I thought there were like 6. I didn't know there were
no,
20.
there's 6 or 7 big ones,
Yeah,
and then
okay.
there's all the little hoodoos and shit, like that one that fell down the
sad. Yeah,
right. But I was like, yeah, I want to go to the valley, and I'm like really psyched to try to solo the Zodiac. And he basically like spit his drink out and was like, he's like, dude, you do not need to solo the Zodiac. Like, skip the Zodiac, because I had done all this gnarly stuff in the Fisher Towers, but I had no perspective. He's like, that thing is going to be easy, way too easy for you. Like, there's going to be a big lineup on it. Like, go do something different. And yeah, he was absolutely right. I've still never climbed the Zodiac, actually.
I mean, still a great route, but you're right that it is much easier than anything you would have done in the Fissures.
Yeah. So I kind of like arrived in Yosemite, and I was a big wall climber, like 8 climber. That was the era, and I was I kind of skipped right up to the big dogs as far as repeating some of the hard routes there. What
year was the classic YouTube aid climbing rant from?
Well, that actually is probably like 2007 or 8.
Oh, so much later. Because that's a classic rant, and honestly, I think that's your real introduction to podcasting. That's when you realize that you should have an audience.
Well, it did.
And how did that happen? Tell me the story. I just watched that again the other day because it's so classic, and I remembered it from back in the day. And, well, it's just it's something that I've remembered forever, and I was like, is that as classic as I remember it being? And then I listened to it again. I was like, it's pretty freaking funny. But who recorded it, and like why is it on YouTube, and like what's the story behind your aid climbing rant? Well, it's like several dudes, right? I mean, there's the guy that keeps handing you a drink or whatever. There's somebody recording, obviously. There are a couple people laughing.
Yeah.
So what's even the context? Like, where are you guys?
All right, so we are in Kochimo.
Okay.
So, and this is, again, I think it'd probably be like 2008 or 9. So a little bit ahead of the curve in Kochimo.
Totally. So you're like in the middle of nowhere in Chile.
Fame. Yeah. And, I mean, it was established, but I think internationally it wasn't well known. But, yeah, and it'd been fucking raining forever and ever. And I had like at other campfires or whatever, my friend Dan, the guy who's handing me drinks, and he says a rurp or whatever, in mud. He had heard me kind of like, drunkenly sort of formulate this like thing, this idea that I had, because I had like stopped aid climbing and kind of
left that if A5 there must be corpses.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'd done the whole, I'd been in my room for days with equations on the chalkboard, like trying to figure it all out. But and so he's goading me to do it. He'd heard me kind of do it before, and then Matt, this other friend of ours, he's recording, and he had like an early website that, pre-YouTube kind of website that he'd put videos on and stuff. And and so they just, we were drinking, it's raining, we've been sitting in the rain for weeks. They just sort of goaded me into it. And then
it's so funny,
Matt put it on his website, but then my friend BJ Sabara, who lives here in Carbondale and had an early kind of self-done climbing website, he actually put it on YouTube like when YouTube was nothing. Like, it was a very early, like, semi-viral thing on YouTube as far as climbing is concerned. And that's how people kind of got a hold of it. And at that time, like, there was like 80,000 views, which like today isn't that much, but
at the time it was like every climber in the world had seen it.
And it was, people recognize me now from the Enormocast or from my voice. But I actually was the first time too that I'd be at a crag and somebody'd be like, "Wait, you're the fucking aid rank guy." And it also pissed a lot of people off.
And so for anybody that is listening to this who hasn't seen it, you should just Google Chris Kalous aid rant. It'll be the first thing that comes up under videos, and it's classic.
Yeah.
But
I don't think any of the Enormocast fans have not heard about the aid rant. So,
you don't think?
But yeah. I don't know, a few maybe. Yeah.
300 episodes in, you for sure have people who have joined along in the last year or two. I mean, honestly, like, no, but this is actually something that I think is worth getting into, is that climbing has grown so much in the last few years that nowadays I think that a lot of the things that the two of us take for granted in climbing, like, of course, everybody knows A5, RURPs, and all this stuff. I mean, if you started climbing 3 years ago in a gym, like, you have never heard of that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? No. Like, it just doesn't even exist in the climbing world anymore.
Yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, we take that for granted. Because, it was such a more of a, the media we were consuming there was so little of it, and it was, at least at the core, it was much more collective. Like, everybody literally was like reading the same magazine.
Yeah, because there was only one. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So there was these points of reference, you're right, that we could all count on in a certain extent.
And it's just that there just weren't as many climbers, and people in it had been in it longer and just learn more. It's like now if you start in a gym, you could start with 5 friends and all 5 of your friends would just wouldn't know anything about climbing yet. It's like,
right.
Like your whole community is just like random people that just started climbing and like are psyched to get outdoors. And I think that's awesome. I'm totally into seeing more people get out and climb. But it's just that there's just way less of that sort of institutional knowledge in a way, or like sort of shared culture or whatever.
Yeah, I agree. The aid rant should be part of your institutional knowledge. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, here, give me the 10-second summary. Like, what's the the kernel at the heart of the aid rant?
I rarely do 10-second summaries of anything, but it's basically that aid climbing is not as hard as like all the media said it was, and A5. No one ever died on A5, even though it's supposed to be a death fall if you fall. So yeah, it was just basically like ruminating on why no one dies and if A5 exists, and the only A5 should be basically, like you said, should result in a corpse. That's the most quoted line from me. It's like,
it's so funny.
There's the corpse. Like people have said it to my face. There's the corpse.
But surely you've climbed some A5 where you felt like you would die if you fell.
Right. I think I kind of get at that in there, but yeah, I mean, it's like, of course.
I've done a lot of A2 where I think I would die if I fell, but the reality is that, either I don't fall or I don't die when I do fall, and it turns out fine, but it's so scary.
Well, part of it was that I had done a lot of it, right? Of the storage stuff in El Cap, these hardest routes and stuff. And I just realized that like the bullshit myth making in the meadow didn't actually live up to the reality of it. People are like, it's like a full pitch of hooking. It's like, no, there is no full pitch of hooking.
You're like, no, it's actually 4 hooks and then a rivet and then 2 hooks and then a rivet and then 3 more hooks.
Right. And then it drilled this and like that. And like, So I was just kind of like, I mean, we don't need to get into it, but the valley like kind of burned me out a little bit. Just the scene there. I think I was there in sort of a kind of cranky low point as far as the scene is concerned.
In some ways, don't you feel like your aid rant has kind of borne out, because aid climbing is not cool anymore by any means. Like nobody aid climbs. It's not glorified in media. Like nobody even knows what it is anymore. Nobody even cares. It's like,
no, I mean, I didn't make that up. I mean,
you were ahead of your time.
Yeah, because you know what, the monkeys were like, I was at the beginning of the monkeys era, and those guys kind of they actually, I postulated that this shit was not that hard, and then they actually proved it. They did the, it's like Dean and Evo, I think, and maybe Sean, I'm not sure, but did the reticent wall, the hardest route on El Cap, in like 36-hour push, right? We did it. I did it in 7 days or whatever, Yeah. And so it's like those guys kept just smashing the state, as it were, to quote the name of a aid climb actually up on the diamond, but they kept proving like my thing, like, yeah, this is, this isn't as gnar as everybody says it is. But
do you know the story on Jesus Built My Hot Rod, the aid route on the left side of Leaning Tower in the valley? It's the thing that Todd Skinner was working on when he died.
I have climbed it.
Oh yeah. Well, so do you remember a pitch called Out with the Old? No, Go for the Old. It's like an A4 hooking pitch. It's like Go for the Old, like Old English, like OLDE.
Yeah, vaguely. I don't know.
It's that, well, whatever. So I wrapped that route with Todd Skinner when he was fixing lines on it and he told me this whole story, like, oh, this pitch is called Go for the Old, like Old English. It's like A4 hooking. Anyway, when they went up to the free climb it turns out the pitch is like 10 plus R or whatever. It's just edging. You just climb up. It's like 510. And so he added like a bolt here or something and called it Out with the Old. Like, like he's like, this is so stupid. Like, why is this like hardcore aid climbing when you can just climb it at 510? Just like use the hooks on your hands,
Yeah, it's exactly right. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I did a route on El Cap, a solar route on El Cap, as kind of like my last, like I was like pretty conscious it was going to be sort of the last thing I did on El Cap in that style. And then I got talked into doing, by a friend of mine, of doing that route actually. So that actually was sort of my last big aid route in the valley. Yeah, so it's just funny because I was kind of over it in that same way. And then we went and climbed that. And I felt the same way. I was like, this isn't even that hard as an aid climb.
Yeah, like this is kind of dumb.
Yeah, anyway. But yeah, so that's just a way that crossed up is interesting, that was my last route there as a big aid wall anyway.
And so did you personally transition into free climbing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I moved back to Colorado. I was actually living in California then. I moved back to Colorado, and I got back into kind of like, the other thing that happened is right after that I spent a summer in Vegas, actually, and everybody rolls their eyes when I say it was a summer, but it was like April to August. And as you know, there's plenty to do.
Dude, I live here, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
And
I got really into climbing at Clark Mountain, my buddy Bruce Anderson and I. And he kind of like, I dabbled in sport climbing. I'd clip bolts, but I'd never sport climb per se, where I'd like, went and projected and tried things that were really hard and stuff. And I started doing that year, and so that kind of helped me transition into sort of, sport climbing as something that I liked. Climbing down, I think I did my first 13A that year, which was 1,000 churches up there at the third.
Well, that's a really proud first 13A.
Yeah,
that's
it's
cool.
sick. I'm psyched on. I still can remember like almost every move of it.
Oh wow!
And you had to hike your ass up there and everything else.
Totally,
and,
that's
like Clark was abandoned then.
It's funny because
climb down there now, but
Randy's called Clark the El Cap of limestone. It's fitting that that's where you did your first hard route.
Yeah, and I had this relationship with Levitt that started with me repeating one of his test pieces on El Cap actually, and
which one?
Kind of stayed friends. Scorched Earth.
I haven't even heard of that. Where is that?
Yeah, exactly. Aid climbing dog. It's gone.
Yeah, it's gone. Which part?
It's over on the right side, kind of by the trip.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I have no idea what that route is, and I know El Cap pretty well too. I'm like, what the heck?
It's like by Aurora, goes out those roofs by the trip. But it was famous because him and Slater had invented the Lovetron or something they called it, but it was a VE24 tent pole. North face dome tent pole with a hook on the end of it. And you actually would just put your hook on an edge like 15 or 20 feet away and then yard up to it and just hope you had found some like really good edge. And so people...
That sounds so scary.
Yeah. I think I did an improvement on it where they would just put the rope in it and then yard up, which means there were potential to like take a double size.
Oh, did you put like a piece of cord on it or something?
Yeah, so with little loops in it. But then when I actually came to do it, I made my loops too far apart because the purlin stretched. And so then I was actually high stepping to try to get my loops, which was also terrifying. So anyway, but everybody had like slandered him for doing it that way. Like, I mean, I don't need to get into all these dumb aid climbing debates, but so nobody had repeated it. And so I got some beta from him, and me and my friend Chris Ryder went and did the second ascent of it like 12 or 15 years after it had gotten done.
That's the funny thing about aid climbing is people slander that, but you're like, well, at least they didn't have to drill a bunch of extra holes to get up there. It's like at a certain point, it's all cheating anyway. You're like, who cares?
Totally.
Like, it's crazy.
It's exactly right. And so, but yeah, we did that one. But anyway, back to the free climbing. But yeah, that got me into that. And I moved back to Colorado. I got into climbing in the Black Canyon. That was sort of when I was.
And you only choose the worst places to climb. It's kind of crazy.
Come on, dude. You gotta. Yeah. Have you climbed down there?
No, I've actually never been to the Black, but only because I haven't been in Colorado at the right season. And like I was in Rifle in the summer, and I've always wanted to, and I want to do some link up stuff there someday, but I just have never made it. So.
Oh, it's so rad for that.
I know, it's just. Well, it's just kind of in the middle of nowhere, You're like, oh, you gotta like. It is, really...
but that's what's nice about it, dude.
Yeah, I guess.
No, you gotta come down, man. There's so much to do. I mean, come down, do the H12, nothing else.
I know. I want to for sure, but it's just
it would be easy for you, but like it's a kind of common hard man challenge to do both rims in a day or 3 in a day. Mm-hmm. Like Penning's, those guys did like the painted wall, the north rim, south rim in a day. So yeah, there's all sorts of fun stuff like that.
I'll get there eventually.
All right. Yeah, cool. Well,
it's just it's hard to know the season and the right time. Yeah. I don't know. It's like
it's a little tricky for sure.
But talk to Warren. Big picture though, you went from adventure aid climbing, you got into free climbing, you moved back to Colorado. And so at what point did you get into podcasting? Like, cause that's the ultimate modernity. It's like, that's really embracing the future.
There's an important phase in there I think we have to talk about real quick is that I did like try to become legit. I got a job teaching here in Carbondale. That's how I moved here. I taught high school for 5 years.
Yeah, you were teaching music? Weren't you Hayden's music teacher?
No, I wasn't. I was Hayden's. I started an extracurricular blues band with kids.
Okay.
And then he was in 8th grade, but the music teacher was like, you should bring these kids up, him and his friend Dominic, who are horn players. He plays the sax. And this friend of his, Dominic, played the trombone. And so they would come over from the middle school for our rehearsals, and him and his buddy were our horn section. Yeah.
Classic.
And that's the first time I met him, and I had known his dad from Climbing Magazine and stuff.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, that was the first time I met him. I got these they bring a tear to the eye, these like the cutest pictures of him as this little kid blowing his saxophone on stage, because we would play shows and stuff like that. So
man.
Yeah. So I wasn't a music teacher, I was a lit teacher, but I did that extra. Yeah. So, but I did 5 years where I tried to become like a legit member of society, and that fell apart.
Yeah, why'd that fall apart?
Partially it was economics of living here. On a teacher's salary seemed terrible, and so I quit, and I was going to move like to Grand Junction, which is west of here and cheaper, and especially back then, and
closer.
And
to
then
Chaussee
I just kind of
climbing.
never did. What's that?
And closer to Chaussee climbing, like everything that your heart sings for. You're like, the rock is worse. It's way muddier. You're like, perfect. I should move.
Get further away. I mean, rifles is Chaussee that gets to, but yeah. So I moved, or I didn't move though. I just kind of ended up hanging around here, and I kind of reverted to a climbing bum, and that's like that year or after that, I went to South America for almost a year. I went in there. I went to Jordan. I know you repeated our route there.
Yeah, which one was that?
It was called Dar al Salam on Nasrani North.
Yeah, that's like it was 513 something, like
13A, like 10 pictures.
Yeah, I remember that thing.
Yeah. But anyhow, so in that era, I started painting houses, and so which was like a classic climber thing where I could paint for like all summer long and save money, and then travel and do stuff. And so I kind of reverted to a climbing bum mode. I was in my mid 30s, pretty much.
Do you feel like that says something about society where you're better off painting houses than being a lit teacher?
Oh, 100%.
You're sort of like,
in these mountain towns,
like what the heck?
It's super topsy-turvy.
That makes me sort of sad. Because you're like, you have a real education, you have like real things to do, and you're like, instead I choose to paint houses and go to South America for a year because it's cheaper.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there are places where that doesn't work, but in these mountain towns, 100%, like development or construction and stuff is way more lucrative. You go to like a suburbs of Chicago, there where teachers get paid well, then it's a little bit different. But yeah, no, it's a mess. But I felt a little bit guilty, and I actually enjoyed teaching, but it just kind of turned out that way. And then I started painting houses, and in that era was when I was listening to podcasts, right? And that was like early adopter. So this would have been
that's super early adopter. I think that's an important thing to kind of note because you started the Enormocast in 2011. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's like, that feels like pre-internet already. It's like smartphones were like just starting in a way. It's like social media is not that cool. Like it's all just, I don't know. That's pretty early.
Yeah. Well, I think historians will look at that, I think, as second wave podcasting in my mind, because there was like when it was super underground and it only existed on iPods, and I caught the end of that and the beginning of, in my opinion, what happened was that NPR actually blew podcasting up by deciding to rebroadcast all their shows as podcasts. And that, like, the fact that you didn't have to tune in at this certain time to hear one of their shows, you could just download it or listen to it on demand, which is something on demand culture is what we live with now, but it wasn't that way even 15 years ago. And so this idea that, you could just listen to This American Life whenever you want instead of having to turn the radio on at 9 a.m. or whatever. That actually, I think, really blew podcasting into the sort of what it is now, was the start of it. And then the smartphone, because that was just slightly pre the iPhone, from having to download it onto your iPod, which I was doing as a painter. That's how it all started. And people have heard this before, but I was just listening to them. I had kind of discovered this podcasting thing, and they were all early DIY ones. And I was like, this is cool. And that's when I was like, well, fuck, I could do this, because I'd been playing music for years and I knew how to record basic shit. And, I kind of had I joke that I had the realization that everyone else had about 10 years later, which is that
it's really easy.
It's really easy. You already own the equipment for the most part if you have a laptop, and they're super cheap. Like there's no production costs to a podcast almost, or now there is because they've changed. But everybody like was like, oh, I can just press record on this laptop I already own, you know, and I can post them for free somewhere. Basically, like I'll do that. And then all the businesses and companies all decided to try to do podcasts, but that's gone by the wayside. But
one of the things I was thinking about with the Enormocast, I mean, I've always kind of thought of the Enormocast as like the Joe Rogan of climbing media. It's like your long form, unfiltered interviews, you know, with people. But I think part of what made it feel that way is because you always did them, or, you know, you've tried to always do them in person with people. And so many of your podcast descriptions are like in a sweaty basement, or like in a, you know, like tucked in the van, or like with whoever in this place. And I was thinking about that because now that feels almost a little old school because, you know, we live in a world of Zoom and it's like so much easier to do things remotely. But when you started the Enormocast, it's like you really did have to have your microphone physically with somebody. And I remember like sitting with you doing the podcast back when it was like you had to be in a room together and chit chat. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about the evolution from like physically being with people in all these different places to nowadays being able to do things remotely? And
yeah, totally. Well, that was partially technology. Like Skype existed when I started this, but it was, you know, terrible sounding. Yeah. And you know, I think a lot of people tried to use it at their podcasts, but that was part of it. The other thing was my inspiration, which I've said many times, was Mark Maron's podcast, WTF or What the Fuck with Mark Maron. And he was doing them in person in his garage. Like that was all part of the vibe. Like you had to go to even had Obama come to his garage, you know, like, and they had to put snipers on. You know, it's a couple of great episodes about that. Is, you know, the Secret Service had to like clear the street and put snipers on roofs and all these sort of stuff. But he made him come to his. I mean, actually, I think Obama insisted on coming to the garage because he wanted like the authentic
do the real
experience.
thing,
because he was cool. But yeah, the thing that killed it was the pandemic. And I can't always remember, but it's like 205 or 206 face-to-face interviews. And then the pandemic kind of like forced my hand. I made it through to July, you know, it started more or less March 2020, and I had a backlog, and then July came along and everybody was still skittish about traveling and, you know, whatever. And so I just kind of pulled the trigger. And there was a learning curve because the tech wasn't even as good as it is now.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then, but I mean, I tell you, like looking back on that now, like the fact that I pulled that off, and I remember when I hit episode 200, I was like 2 episodes shy of like what I should have been. In other words, there was only 2 months in like 7 years that I had missed getting 2 podcasts out face to face. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't even conceive of how I would do that now. And plus no one would do it. Like the thing I realized too is it's once this era of doing these on the computer, then it was a real imposition for me to force people to try to get in touch.
Well, I think there are actually a couple other like bigger forces that were acting both in your favor and against you too. Is that one? Right. I think part of what made the Enormocast so great, you know, from the beginning was that you had a level of access that a lot of people didn't have, like being in Colorado, going to outdoor retailer, like going to these industry trade shows, going to climbing festivals, going to events. Like basically you were just able to meet people where they were and interview them. I mean, I know that we've done a couple interviews like in Lander or whatever wasn't that at the Climbers Fest one of the years?
Yeah, we did one there, and then you did one in my kitchen here in Carbondale. Yeah, the first one.
But basically, it's like by living somewhere that's like sort of centrally located for the climbing world, and then going to lots of events, and then also just existing in a time when like outdoor retailer was a much bigger event and everybody congregated for it. I just felt like you had like this access and at the time it was kind of the only climbing podcast. So, you know, it's kind of like, oh, if somebody has a story to tell, that's the place to tell it. Whereas now, it's like, nowadays everybody has their own YouTube channel, you know, they're like, whatever, I'll just release my own content, like whatever. Yeah. It's like, it's just like times really changed like that, where it's like much more decentralized now, for better or for worse.
Yeah. I mean, and it's caused me to like kind of especially in the last couple of years, and even right now to think about like the future of this thing. Because I had the playing field for like 6 or 7 years at the minimum. I mean, people talk about the Dirtbag Diaries, and I have no rivalry with Fitz. I literally have talked to him a few times in the last few weeks. He's always been a huge support. But it's not a climbing podcast.
Yeah, it's
it does climbing content
outdoor,
once in a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a long time when I was the only one. And it was kind of cool. I mean, I started as this like hobbyish thing just because I could, and I was single and I had nothing going on. And actually, one of the little factoids that's interesting is I lived in this cabin up the Crystal River, which is out of Carbondale. And at my house, I could get one cell on my phone, like one bar, no internet. So I actually started a podcast and lived in a place for the first couple of years where I had no internet, and I would produce it all, and then I would go to the library during the day, and that's when I would upload it, or at night, like I'd be that guy in the car that, is doing something sketchy, like
sitting outside the library,
lit up by the screen.
That was me for so many years, like sitting outside the Wi-Fi, like poaching Wi-Fi. Like,
do you remember when you could like drive down streets and actually before people were putting codes on their the security codes, you could just drive down streets looking for Wi-Fi? Did you ever do that?
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember that used to be a thing living in the Fort Econoline. You're just driving around being like, God, I just, I'm supposed to like do this thing, or like I'm supposed to send someone a photo. Like, how do I do it? And it's like, right. Yeah. It's like so
I
different
did.
now.
It's kind of weird, but that's what I was up to. I was like, I would do it like that. And then, like you said, I had this access, and at first it didn't matter. Like I just did all my friends. And then as it started to gain popularity, that's when I was like, well, heck, I got to go to the trade show and make deals. And, I used to go there and I'd stack up like 7 interviews in 3 days or whatever. So I would have
I remember you doing that.
Yeah. But I realized though, I mean, and now it's like, it was limiting, and people, did, if not criticize, at least were like, yeah, you got to get more East Coast people. You got to get more people who travel. And I'm like, or who don't travel or whatever. And so there was a lot of that, and that's opened up, which is, I can call whatever Europe, I can do whatever now and get all these sort of a much wider range of voices using this as the tool. Even though I try to do face-to-face ones now and again too. So
is that better or worse though?
What do you mean?
Well, it's just interesting because when the whole world is available to you, in some ways it's harder to like in some ways when your options are limited, you just interview the people on hand, you interview the people you run into, and it's like, it's all kind of makes sense. It's like once everything is available, then you're like, what's my selection criteria? Do I only interview the most rad, cutting edge first ascents? Do I only interview, like guests who deserve it or whatever? You know what I mean? All of a sudden you're like, wait, so how do I choose when everything is available?
Well, Alex, you've just wandered into like one of my existential crises of this last year, actually, in the future of this podcast, because that's absolutely right. And I miss the days when it was like that. I was just a mercenary, and if you seemed sort of interesting, we do a podcast,
totally,
right?
Totally.
But that is no longer rewarded. What's rewarded is having the hottest person that can link to all the things, and it's like is on everybody's mind because the algorithm loves that. And so I am in this position now where I don't want to do that. I don't want to pursue the person doing the latest, greatest thing necessarily. I want to talk to who I want to talk to. But, if now that it's a business and I have numbers and I sell numbers and it's like changed it all. And I've just been kind of thinking about that this last year of like, it's no longer my creative impulses are the only thing driving me. It's now, well, gosh, if I post that, it's not going to get that many downloads because it's Jim Erickson and nobody knows who that is. And
totally,
my fans will love it, and then it'll end there. But I want to, because Jim Erickson's fucking rad. He's getting older. I don't want him to disappear without, archiving what he has to say and what he did and teaching people. But it's not good business.
Honestly, I didn't know
you're
he was
good
still
business,
alive.
Alex.
I was like,
this is fucking good business.
Yeah,
right
this
here.
is business. Heck yeah.
But honestly, I mean,
I'm gonna
it's like,
tag this shit. I'm gonna blow you up.
Exactly. And it's like, well, can you come back on my show again in a few months?
But what you're really describing is the tension that everybody feels when they go pro, because like this is the age-old dilemma with like being a professional climber or something, where you're suddenly like, oh, now I have to, cater to sponsors. Like, what about the things I want to do versus the things I'm supposed to do? I mean, and isn't that really just growing up? At a certain point, you're like, oh, I'm trying to feed my child. You're kind of like, you have to, I don't know. It's like working versus playing. Like, at what point do you merge them?
But that's the thing is, do I turn this thing that started out as play, essentially? Yeah. When I did the first 20 episodes, it was this, I was like doing this cutting edge, cool thing that nobody understood, like I literally, as you remember, I'm sure you were part of this because I think Julie actually was like, you need to get this kid Alex Honnold is going to be here. Have you heard of Alex Honnold? I'm like, yeah, of course I've heard of fucking Alex Honnold, but it wasn't Alex Honnold of today. And she's like, well, I'll talk to him. He'll do your podcast or whatever that thing is you're doing, And so it's like, that was funny. The thing. I was like,
I don't even remember the first time.
Yeah, this is called a podcast, like I would have to explain what it was. And that was like cool. And now, I kind of want to try to recapture that, and I can make money elsewhere. In some ways, though,
isn't that the nature of having done something 300 times? It's like 300 episodes. You're sort of like, dude, totally. Anything that you've done, like if you had sent 300 514s, you'd be like, you know what? Maybe I need to try something else in sport for a while. It's like,
true.
300 is a lot.
Yeah, that's in 13 years or 14 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's like a long time.
Totally, and that's the thing is like it's perpetual motion is sort of a drag right now too. Like so, I'm just kind of thinking about it and stop like earn my money elsewhere. I can earn money. It's just like any climber that maybe they're a pro for a while and then they realize, well, I can actually do more climbing if I just get a job.
Well, I mean, I'm already like, I'm still very much a professional climber, but there are certain things where I'm kind of like, man, with corporate speaking, I can just buy the things I need and not have to jump through any hoops. Or like, like basically there are other ways to make income that just kind of are, kind of easy. And you're like, well, just stick to whatever is easy and fun.
But, and I think you may have a comment on this from your life as well. But I mean, it also has been this thing where I could, at least as far as my connection to the community, I'm at this stage in life where I can keep climbing. That's great. But as far as like my connection, I can go gently into that good night. And I think that one of the benefits of this thing is that like I have this connection and it forces me or whatever, or I get to reach out and talk to all these people that are younger than me and doing the cool things and doing the cutting edge stuff. I go to events because of this. And sometimes I'm like, oh, fuck, I got to go to another festival. What the fuck? But I always get there and I always have a great time and I always love hanging out. And so I think I would be a much sort of hermitish, crustier climber if I wasn't doing this thing. And
you'd revert back to your aid climbing roots. You'd just be like a cranky old man, like nailing up like choss in the desert.
Exactly. But, it's just... It's like I'm like examining its value, its intrinsic value in my life, as far as it's because it's like it's a source of income, and I need to sort of get paid for the time if I'm going to keep doing it at the level I'm doing it, which is 24 episodes a year, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just kind of thinking about it and what if it would be better, and also would it be a better show if there were less of them? I think there's an argument that it might be.
That stuff is interesting though, because then again, you start worrying about the algorithm stuff and like, if you don't have a standard cadence and like how often you're releasing episodes, then like, do people still care? I don't know. Cause like,
well, that's what I mean. Like I could stop caring if people care. Well, if I made it back into this vanity project, then it's like, because I know that people would care because I think I can count on this core. It's whether I can expand that core, and that's the hustle. And so,
and do you want to? I mean, literally, I'm having the same conversations because with Climbing Gold, they're sort of like, oh, well, now it's all about YouTube, it's all about video. We should be recording, and I'm kind of like, if we're recording, then I should just have a freaking YouTube channel. But I don't want a YouTube channel because I hate all that stuff, and I don't want to be shooting videos. And I'm kind of like, podcasting is fun because you get to interview interesting people, you have fun conversations. It's like relatively low key. As soon as you start filming things, then I'm kind of like, if we're doing film, then like this should be a freaking TV project or something. Like, I don't want to do freaking YouTube things. I don't want to be filming interviews and then releasing it, like, just because it'll get more traction and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, as soon as you have to escalate it to something else, then I'm sort of like, I don't want to do that. You know, like I'm willing to have a fun chat and like have a nice time with people, but you know, I'm not willing to be a fake movie star like all the time for, I don't know, it's just like, oh, I hate that stuff.
I'm in the same boat, but anyhow, but yeah, that's sort of the podcast story up to the present, you know, that's
so is this when you unveil your new YouTube channel? Are you going straight video instead?
I mean, no, I mean, I don't want to.
Dude, you could have the highest rated aid climbing channel because nobody does that.
No, there's this cat out there, Oliver Tippett.
I don't know who
you
that
heard
is.
this name?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, he's like the latest guy that's out there climbing the hard walls on El Cap.
Oh no, I think I met that guy, British guy.
Yeah, British guy.
Oh, I met him on the nose this
stuff.
season. I met him with what's his name, Michael, whatever, the guy that had just done the quad, the like mega link up. They dragged him up so he could do one pitch of like A3 nailing next to the nose. They basically did the nose in a day with one crazy pitch. And I was like, that sounds like a tremendous amount of effort. I was like, why are you guys doing that? Yeah, but
because everybody's got like, they're all wringing, you know, novelty out of these things that are so old. But yeah, I think he's sort of like already taken that niche. Like he is the.
But does he have a cool YouTube channel?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh man,
I mean, yeah.
Lame.
So there
I just think
it's all been done, dude.
I think it'd be gripping if you did GoPro footage, you know, helmet cam footage of you just ripping a whole aid pitch. It'd be so scary.
Dan Osman, I think he did that. I don't know.
Dude, I literally just I was trying to put ropes on this like 13D wall here in Red Rock that's like kind of sporty. It's not like dangerous, but it's the kind of thing that when you're free climbing it, you like place a good piece and then you punch it like 9 moves and then you clip a bolt eventually. But when you're trying to French free it just to get ropes on it so you can like work it and there's no chalk, I was like, oh my God, this is so scary because I like wasn't really willing to like take these giant wingers over and over. Anyway, I wound up aid climbing on like this micro nut and then I used a blue ball nut as a handhold. I was afraid to really weight it, so I just kind of held it with one hand and then tried to like climb past it and eventually made it to the bolt. But I was like, God, aid climbing is so scary. I think it's like when you're watching all the grains fall out of the placement, you know, you put something in and then as you start to weight it, you see rock falling out and you're just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, I joke that like if you somehow like magically transported me like now, like, you know, 2024 me to the middle of one of those pitches that I would do on El Cap,
you'd shit yourself.
In my 20s, I would like lose my mind. Like I would just go catatonic, and they would have to come and like somehow get me off of there.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, this is like, because obviously, like the podcast has also been this massive research project in a sense, right? Talking to hundreds of climbers.
Yeah,
is that you just get more scared when you're old. Unless you're some sort of anomaly, I think we all just get...
I think I'm slowly starting to experience that too, and I'm kind of like, why is that? Like, is that just like an innate thing?
I mean, honestly, it could very well be, and I'm just like talking out my ass. You usually have more research at your fingertips, just because of the way you do your reading and stuff. But I mean, maybe it's just the loss of testosterone, because that's a fact. Like we are losing testosterone. I mean, we're losing it right now, Alex. It's somehow leaving our bodies as we speak. And testosterone is a hell of a drug, man. It really is. And it's like you're boiling over with it in your 20s, and you know, it's just like it gets you through, man. It like makes you a warrior. You know, I just actually funny, I rewatched Free Solo because my wife had never seen it.
Oh yeah, classic.
Yeah, Miles watched some of it too, actually.
Yeah.
He was mildly interested, but
didn't really care.
You know, there's some quote in there about some warrior stuff, and I mean, I mean, I guess Russia does right now, but they try not to send 50-year-olds to
Russia's
war.
sending like 65-year-old convicts into war right now.
That's not going to end well, but for either. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason you recruit if you need people to run at, you know, barrages of bullets. You recruit young men, and they will. And history is rife with young men just charging at spears or bullets or cannons or whatever the era was. They will charge right in there, And
that's interesting.
A 35-year-old would be like, wait, you want me to do what now?
Yeah, totally. But you always wonder, is that physiological, like because you have lower testosterone, or is that just because you're smarter, or slightly more experienced, or just like
it's some heady combination of all of it. But I think
because I wonder a little bit, and actually, and this is probably a real question for you, having interviewed so many climbers, is like how much of it do you think is just collecting baggage over the years? Like you collect these like terrible stories, you hear about terrible accidents, like terrible things happen to friends, and it just like weighs up over the time. It's like,
yeah, that has to be a part of it. Like I said, it has to be, but I still go back to like, what you do with those stories, how they affect you changes, because I definitely could blow off pretty heavily like a relatively close accident, or I didn't have anyone in my 20s, when I was in my 20s, that I knew really well that passed away necessarily. Well, actually that's not true. Very early on there was a couple, and you just kind of moved on in a way that
but do you think that's something that at first you can move on, and then with each progressive accident you're like, oh, it's just harder and harder to move on, like it starts to accumulate in a way?
Yeah,
because that's kind of how it feels for me, where I'm like, like I've always felt like those kinds of things affect me less than some of my friends, let's say, or that like in general I'm probably less emotionally affected than average, and yet still over time I'm like, what, I do feel like it's like slowly adding up, where you're just like, oh, it's just kind of a lot. You're like, that's heavy.
Yeah, like I said, it's got to be some combination of knowledge and understanding. But one thing you need to monitor, because how old is your oldest kid?
Almost 3.
Okay, almost 3. So you really haven't gotten into the like meat of like Pixar movies and Disney movies yet. But monitor your own response to those movies.
You mean if you start crying immediately, then you know that you're softening up?
Yeah, totally. Because I was like, there's like, my wife and I joke about the end of Encanto. There's a song in the movie Encanto, which is one of our favorites.
Actually, my wife tried to watch that with our daughter yesterday, but she was like not having it, so she had to switch movies like 1 minute in. Yeah.
She's 3's a little young for long plot movies, but there's a song at the end of that like just like hits us. Steph and I joke about it all the time. It's like the end of it. And, the chords. It's the guy from Hamilton,
Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah, so the guy's like,
he's a genius.
He knows how to just like punch you in the face with his music and be like, so it's like I feel like I'm not crying over nothing, but I don't cry, but you can just like feel it. And I sit there and I'm like, this is a fucking Disney movie, dog. Like you climbed day 5, like what's your problem?
Dude, freaking the other day, I've never seen Finding Nemo, but my wife put it on for our daughter the other morning, or like the other day, and within 5 minutes, I was like, oh my God, the whole family just died. Like this idyllic life, like the mother dies in like 4 minutes into the movie. And I was like, this is horrible. Like, how is this a kid's movie? It's like, what the heck?
You got to teach them about death, dude.
I know, I guess. I was like, heavy baggage, I was like, I'm collecting trauma.
Yeah. But that softness to me is like part of the whole deal. So, but do
you think you accumulate it faster though by podcasting, like by interviewing tons of people? Because basically it's like, because you just have to dive into other people's stories so much. You just hear so much more of that.
I didn't know this when I started the podcast, but I am genuinely interested in like, it's just allowed me to go deep with people, like you just said.
Well, that's what I like about podcasting, is that you get to the heart of things, like in a way that you don't in like normal interviews and things.
Yeah, and so I just kind of realized that right off, and I could, just talk a lot about being emotionally affected by talking to people. I've cried in my interviews, like I've cried with the person who's crying. I have one in the bag right now that hasn't been put out yet, that both of us freaking cry like half the time. So, and that's like powerful stuff. And like, it just goes to the meat of what we do, that has this danger in it and it has this tragedy in it. And, there's no way around it. If you stay in the game long enough, so, it's like, interviewing people who are dead now, like that's crazy that we did that I did that. And it's such an honor that I did it,
speaking of, so correct me if I'm wrong, but a couple of your first interviews were with Hayden, weren't they? Like post Saratorio. Isn't that one of the things that kind of blew up the Enormocast?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was 6 and 7. So yeah, right in the beginning. And there's this kind of backstory to it that also sort of just kind of predicted the future in a way, is that, he came back from CHOP and Saratoria and he was really affected. I don't know if you remember, or if you talked to him a lot then, but like that he was getting so much hate. Yeah. Really bothered him.
When going to jail in Shelton and stuff. I thought the whole thing was kind of traumatizing.
Yeah. But then when he got home and a lot of these people that knew him, were busting his ass, and, it was early internet forum time. So the taco was going off, and, people that he respected, like Steve Schneider, was going off on him and stuff. And, it was naive for him to not expect that.
Yeah.
He's a kid.
That's the beauty of youth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's like, I was doing the right thing. I can't believe they all hate me. You're like, well, it's complicated.
I was like, look, I'm doing this thing. It's called a podcast. Literally, I'm like, it's that's what I said. I'm like, it's room. We can press play, record, and it's room for you to explain yourself. Okay. What you're, responding to a comment or all that shit is not a place. And I was like, if you do this, I think it's going to help. I think people who spend the time to listen to this long form thing, if they disagree with you, it'll be a disagreement, not like that he's a fucking idiot or he's an asshole or the stupid kid. And it totally did that. It was like a test of what's the phrase, concept, in terms of, this is a long form format where you get the time to explain yourself. And if someone invests that time to listen, they can't walk away like, oh, he's a fucking dick.
Totally.
In the same way. And it did. It worked. There was a lot of people that got in touch with me and with him, like, oh, I disagree, but I see I understand your motives now. And you're not just a dumb kid who wanted fame or whatever they were saying. So yeah, so it was a proof of concept. And I mean, it's a really special thing to have that. I have 4 or 5 episodes with Hayden, and I mean, it's awesome. What a piece of, it's like, because, I mean, you hung out with him a ton. It's like the way he talked, the way he laughed. I mean, that's all his personality, and you're not going to read that. You can't read it, And his Alpinist article was quite famous, that he talked about Kyle and all that stuff, but that's a polished thing.
Yeah, it's all edited.
Yeah, and so I just feel really glad that we have, I mean, I haven't hardly listened to him because it's too hard still. Because of the sound of his voice and everything. So, but yeah, it's cool. And there's like an early one. I don't know if you got to go, or we should wrap this up. But I interviewed this kid, which has kind of been lost to history here. But it's like I wrote it down. It's like 24 or something. This kid named Kevin Landau, 26, who had cancer, and that's like kind of lost in the archives. But it's a mammoth moment in the whole thing. I went and basically interviewed him in hospice. Well, he wasn't in hospice, but he was living at the hospital on chemo, and it was not looking good. We keep up the hot kind of like, you're gonna beat this, but
did he
truth
die of
was
cancer?
Yeah. He died like a few months later.
Man,
I mean, he was, he had gone into remission and it had come back, and when it comes back, I mean, he admitted it on there, like, you're kind of hosed. But like, I went down there and talked to him, and he was an early adopter of the show. That's how I got in touch with him. A friend, cool. This guy Doug Shepard said, I got this buddy who loves your show, and this would mean a lot to him. And man, like, I kept it together, and then I left, and I was driving back up out of Denver, and I like lost it.
That's so
but
sad.
Anyway, but it was just this thing, like this. I mean, this powerful thing that I kind of happened upon this podcast format.
Totally. Well, so maybe as a last question, then to wrap this up for celebrating 300 episodes of the Enormocast, right. What other episodes do you think people should deep dive in the archive? Like, what should people find? You know what I mean? Because I feel like at least half your listeners must be somewhat recent, just because climbing has grown so much. I mean, nobody scrolls all the way back to 2011 to find your first episodes. Like, what are some other personal highlights from you, or things that you think newer listeners should find?
Well, people have been emailing me once in a while. They're like, "Oh man, I went back and listened to your first one." And,
Dude,
and they're
but
like, you should go back and listen to it.
Spotify doesn't even go back to your first ones. Like when you go on Spotify, it only goes to like 35 or something. Or
I know. You have to go on the other formats.
You have to
that's
find like the
a
dark
technological
web.
thing that I have yet to overcome. There's a reason they can't find them. I can't remember why, but but yeah, you can find them elsewhere, like on the website. But I mean, I think like obviously the famous one. I mean, obviously HKs are all magnificent. He's funny, you know, it's got a lot more meaning even now, but they were great. He was very much like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Like whenever I asked him to come on the show. And so any of those are great. And you can just, you know, search his name and the Enormocast. But, you know, the DiMartino one is super famous, number 11, which was another kind of like realization that we could tell this like very gripping story off the cuff. Because, it's, you know, he lost his leg and he tells the whole story. He's a really good storyteller. That one, I always joke that I peaked at 11, 300 episodes later. I'm
slowly cruising downhill 290 episodes
exactly,
later.
You know,
and then this is your rough landing, number 300. You just let someone else host and the whole thing crashes and you're like, well, everyone off the plane, we crashed.
Like I mean, Peter Croft one, I think that still stands out. Because I think Peter Croft,
yeah, he's the man.
Yeah, and it's a funny one too because you can kind of feel me floundering a little bit, and then
because he's the Peter Croft.
Yeah, and he's like wants to watch TV or whatever, like, because I think he thought it was just some stupid thing, and then he realized, like, you can hear him kind of realize that I knew what I was talking about, and I was like a climber for real. And it was in Vegas with the Red Rock Rendezvous thing. And so I think he thought it was just some bullshit thing. And that was like cool because afterwards I know that he told Julie and Michael Kennedy, like, man, that was really great. It was one of the best interviews I've ever done. And like, he really knew what he was talking about. And like, you can hear him realize that in the podcast, which is kind of cool. Stacey Bear, which is 103, was really another really moving one. He's a, you know, guy who went to war and
I went to freaking Angola with him and detonated unexploded ordnance, like exactly, dug up landmines and like blew him up in a pit. Yeah, as a whole. Stacey Bear is quite the dude.
I mean, honestly, like your one after doing El Cap is fucking sick. Like I felt very honored that you came on my show pretty soon after that, and it wasn't
that was like the month after
exclusive. Yeah, but you hadn't really done too much media yet. Or at least it hadn't come out. I think you'd been on Kimmel, actually. At that point.
Yeah, totally. Like I did Kimmel and I did the Enormocast, you know, the two premier news outlets.
Well, the funny thing is like Kimmel seemed like a big deal, but then once the movie came out, like forget about it. You know?
Exactly.
But yeah, you know, a couple more recent ones. Like I have a really great one, I think, with Michael Gardner, who passed away last month or 2 months ago now. That was really special, and the cool thing is some of these like turned into friendships. Kind of based on these interviews. I mean, Chris Hampton definitely became a friend sort of through doing the interview and hanging out. I think I became friends with Michael, not super close, but Mike. I mean, everybody called him Mike, but and then I mean, recently the Didier ones, dude. Like talking to Didier about it, it's like, oh yeah, dude, we go hard. We go hard on the whole
awesome.
Disappearing in the monastery thing and the whole deal. Yeah,
oh, classic.
So, yeah, those are all like, I mean, yeah, but really just like think of your favorite climber and go Google it because I probably interviewed him. You know,
I know it's like that's the thing is they're only what like 60 notable climbers out there, and you've done 300 episodes, so it's like you must have gotten everybody at this point.
Yeah, the recent Brett Harrington repeat is also I think a really good one from last year, because this evolution between this like, you know, super go getter like psych kind of girl, you know, I don't mean that disrespectfully, to who she is now and what she's gone through since then she was very open about it, and it was kind of an interesting evolution. Cause,
actually, I just climbed with her a bunch in the valley this season, and she's like way more mature in a way, or just, you know, she's just like, she's just grown up. You're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to trying to get Angela Van Wiemersh on this winter for a repeat, because her evolution is very similar. You know, she's been through a lot, and I interviewed her when she was just like this goofy, naive girl from Michigan, and fuck, she's been through a ton. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess so. You still have projects you're excited about, still people you want to talk to, still things. So I guess one way or another, you'll probably make it to at least 310, something like that.
I got like 7 in the hopper, dude.
Oh yeah, okay. So you'll make it to at least 315, I bet. and then you can wind it down.
Then I can wind it down.
Yeah,
the algorithm will stop listening to me altogether.
Yeah. Well, that's the tough thing about trying to. At a certain point, all these kinds of things are just. I mean, it has to be personal passion because it's like the algorithm, the mass appeal, all that. Like you just never know. Like the crowd is fickle. It's like you never really know when that's just going to like turn off or turn away or whatever. And so it's like you kind of have to just be doing it for yourself and like interviewing the people that you find inspiring. Yeah,
I mean, I've gotten loads of advice over the last month as I've been thinking about 2025, and it all turns on that. From the people I respect, it all turns on like
what do you want to do? What do you
want to do? And if just do it for yourself, and if you don't want to do it, stop doing it. Like I have other avenues to make money. This thing doesn't make that much money, so it's like, yeah. And it's been really helpful. Again, from some voices I very much respect. So something will change, and I think I'll bring my core with me and not worry about the rest. And
then take the rest onto YouTube, as you start your channel. I'm
pretty good.
I can't wait to watch.
This is it right here. You should have combed your hair. This is going straight on YouTube.
Yeah, no, you don't think this looks good? This is about as good as it gets, My wife cut my hair. It's free, Anyway. Cool. Well, pleasure chatting. Nice way to round out 300 episodes.
Yeah, thanks, dude.
And
I've appreciated all your input and support on. I mean, you've always, when I've asked you, you've always come to the table, and I appreciate that.
Well, that's because the Enormocast has always been the premier long form climbing podcast. I mean, it's the place to really get into core. Well, I mean, I think that's why I did that freerider episode with you, like right after selling the freeriders. It's a place where that you can get into the niche, like get into the beta, get into the variations. Because when you do like mainstream interviews, you're like, it was a big challenge to climb that mountain, but I overcame that challenge through hard work and preparation. It's like, and then when you do the Enormocast, you can be like, well, so the thing with pitch 4 is that it's slippery as fuck. It's like, it's just totally different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, because I remember I kind of opened with that, I think. Like, how did you get past the fucking free blast? Like,
exactly. And then you can get into like, well, okay, so there's this one move and I tried this other way, but then I worked this variation for a long time. It turns out it's actually harder, so I went back to the normal way. And, it's like, yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of the Enormocast is having space to really tell like real climbing stories.
All right, when are we going to get the uncut 3.5 hour, 3 hour ascent of El Cap out of Jimmy Chin? Get that footage,
you got to petition Jimmy and Chai. I'm not the person to know.
Why not? Like, what could it hurt?
I don't know.
To put together the 3 hour cut.
There'll be this weird. It'll be a whole mystery in the middle where they're like, "What's he do disappearing behind the spire for about 3 minutes in the middle of the climb?" I wonder what's up with those missing 3 minutes. And you're like, no, nothing to see there.
That would start a huge controversy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what do you think he did down the Excalibur chimneys? I don't know, but we should go look for evidence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're right. Foot. Yeah. Anyway, with that should successfully conclude 300 episodes of the Enormocast.
Perfect, dude. We'll see you at 350.
Yeah, classic. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Chris for letting me hijack the show. You all know where to follow Chris, and you can join me, Alex Honnold, at Climbing Gold when you've finished all 300 episodes of the Enormocast, if you can ever manage. It's a lot of content. Hope you're out there having fun, having a safe new year, look out for each other, try hard, and of course, check your knots.
This battle is over, Leonidas. This battle is over. When I say it is over. There is no glory to be had now. Only retreat or surrender or death. But that's an easy choice for us, Arcadian. Spartans never retreat. Spartans never surrender.